war. Hi, everybody. Good morning, Shavua Tov and Chodesh Tov. This is Rejuvenation with Eve Harrow on the Land of Israel Network, broadcasting from Jerusalem. And I am very honored to have Gloria Greenfield with me this morning, the producer and director of The Fight of Our Lives, Defeating the Ideological War Against the West. Excuse me, everybody, I'm a little bit, I came back from 2 weeks in the States, what was actually a very amazing speaking tour, but I came back paying the price. And I came back Friday also right before Shabbat to the terrible news that 2 of our soldiers had been killed. And so I want to, before we start with the interview, just to give from the bottom of my heart, and I know Gloria's as well, and everybody in Israel, our condolences to the families of Netanel and Ziv, wishing a complete recovery to 2 soldiers who are also very badly injured. And I was listening to, well, last night they talked to the mother of Netanel. His family is Shomer Shabbat, and so they got the news after Shabbat started, the dreaded knock on the door. And she was talking about how she just wanted to thank God for the 20 years of having her son. And then the news was talking about the terrorist and saying he was a lone wolf, which is what we hear all the time. He acted alone. He stepped on the gas. He wasn't involved really with any terror organization. And I went with my husband last night to see Gloria's film in Jerusalem. And we're going to talk more about the film now in depth. But one of the things that comes out so strongly in the film is that there is an ideological component to all these lone wolves. They may be acting alone in the sense of they didn't get a command from a specific cell or a specific, terrorist that said, now you go out and do it. But the underpinnings of what they're doing and the ideology and the push behind it is all very much part of a very big swamp. So first of all, Gloria, this is your 4th film.
Yes.
And I've seen all the rest, and they've just been incredible. So first of all, tell my audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the film itself.
My background is in both prior to becoming a filmmaker, my background was in both marketing and media related venues. And then I got very involved in adult Jewish learning, and education has been very important to me. And that is why I decided in 2006 that the direction I was going to go in was film. That film was a very effective venue for creating community conversations, impacting policy, and educating, bringing out facts so that people could come to their own decisions. But it will give people the context of how to process so that they could process the information and really, rather than follow a dogma, think independently and come to their own conclusions. Right. We don't often find that these days so often. It's not something to take for granted. So in 2007, I began working on the first film, which I didn't direct. I produced The Case for Israel, Democracy's Outpost, with an Israeli director. And that film came out in 2008. And after that film came out, I made the decision that I was going to move on with Doc Emmett Productions, which is a nonprofit organization to produce and disseminate films that strengthen Jewish identity, Jewish nationhood, and the values of freedom and democracy. So this is the 4th film. This was the first film that didn't come out exactly 3 years after the previous one. It came out 4 years because my husband and I made a move in the country. And also I had a very sick sister who I wanted to give time to. So it was 4 years.
Okay.
4 years, yeah.
Right. And I think, I'm sure I interviewed you at least one other time. I've seen all your films. So this one is, having just come back from the States, and so many of the things that I'm talking about with people in America. That's where I was on this trip, but I was also in London, in the UK, at Linwood, UK, at the end of December. So many of the things that you talk about here are things that I'm seeing, that I'm talking about. Mainly that this is, well, with the film, and I want you really to explain to my listeners, it's not about so much Islamic fundamentalism as it is what we think of as America, like what is happening on the, not just the campuses, but we just spoke 2 minutes ago, you said about people thinking for themselves. I think this is a war on people thinking for themselves, or what Richard Landes calls cognitive warfare. That's part of the problem here, is that people are being told that if you don't think a certain way, you're just stupid or out of line or unpolitically correct. So,
and also fascist.
So what is going on in the West right now? It's almost like the West is eating itself.
The West is eating itself. The West has turned on itself. It's taken a suicidal turn. Look, from my perspective, we could go back to the demoralization campaigns that the KGB was involved in, and those seeds have blossomed. And it doesn't matter that the Soviet Union fell, because their impact didn't fall.
Right.
So we find these terrible ideologies, really, that anti-Western ideologies post-Holocaust, that were really, promoted by Foucault and Edward Said, etc., that really painted the West as the source of all evil. And I mean, Foucault and Said even went as far as applauding right before the Iranian Revolution, and going into the Iranian Revolution, they applauded the Ayatollah and saying this was wonderful, that that's what the world needs. I mean, they were very, very demented. And unfortunately, it spread like wildfire, and that's what's being taught in the universities in the West today, whether it's North America or Europe. It's a terrible thing of all the problems will be solved if we get away from nations and if we get away from a Western tradition. So what does it mean to get away from Western tradition? Western tradition is, the foundation of Western tradition is the Hebrew Bible.
Right. And
so you take that a step further. If you want to destroy the West, you destroy Judaism and Christianity. And that's what we're seeing. We're really seeing a holy war. Right. We're seeing a holy war against both Judaism and Christianity, and Jews and Christians. Now, there are others who are also being persecuted, but if we're looking at what's happening to the West, we cannot ignore the war against Judaism and Christianity. It's a terrible thing, and so what we're facing is assault from secularism and from jihad. But the secularism and the anti-Western sentiment makes us much more vulnerable to external threats.
Right. So I'm seeing this, I've talked, my listeners have heard this, and they're going to continue to hear this, that this is a religious war.
Yeah.
So it's a religious war on different levels. I definitely think it's the war of Islam against Judaism and Christianity. They are the only true religion, and they need to control the world. But it's also, as you just mentioned now, it's a war against religion completely. It's a war against God. I think that's what this secularism is. And somebody made that point last night. I don't remember who. They had so many wonderful people that you interviewed. Is that you have, one second, where did my thoughts go on this? You have this almost unholy alliance between Islam, this, fanatic Islam, and people who you would think would be the most opposed to everything that Islam stands for in terms of what they pronounce as liberalism, feminism, and black, and all of that. So it's like they wrapped around and met in the back, and they met with anti-Semitism and anti-Christianity, essentially anti-Bible.
Right.
So you're saying that the underpinnings here are the Soviets, but you made a very interesting comment. You said post-Holocaust.
Right.
So do you think that, because somebody does mention that in the film, you think World War II is a turning point here when it comes to actually democracies coming out against democracies?
Yeah, some people may say that, that really from a European perspective, it might have been the First World War.
Okay.
But I think from a Western perspective, it was really, or it went to a new level with the Second World War, with the Holocaust, because it was a way of their dealing with their intense guilt, that it was the fault of the West. It wasn't. It sort of let those who were silent off the hook. By Bruce Thornton, a professor, a historian at at California State at Fresno, makes the point, and I think it's a very important point. It's a very deep point, and it needs reflection. As I would say, most of the commentators in the film, this is a film that one must watch more than once.
Yes.
Yeah. And but he makes the point that what has happened is that we've let go of consequences of our actions.
Right.
And that we demand to be happy. We don't want to be burdened with anything. And if anything goes wrong, it's not our fault. Even if it goes wrong because of our actions, it's not our fault. It's the fault of the system. And I think
everyone's a victim.
Everyone is a victim of the system. So we need to destroy the system. Now, I'd just like to go back to something you said, because I think you were right on. But let's not forget that those who are against, say that they're against religion, oddly enough, they're not against Islam.
Yeah, isn't it strange?
Yeah. So they'll make accommodations. They'll turn, the hijab,
right,
into women's liberation.
Right.
And
female circumcision is okay because we can't interfere with what their culture says that they are allowed to do.
Right. That's the cultural relativism that is spoken about, particularly by Professor Victor Davis Hanson in the film.
He's great.
So the film starts with really an to try to really examine. It does examine the internal threats, like what are these ideologies that have emerged post-Holocaust, post-World War II, that are being permeated now, have penetrated Western universities, and the public square, that are really trying to destroy our values. And cultural relativism is one of them. Cultural relativism, which actually, as Philip Carl Salzman explains in the film, was developed as a research technique for anthropologists in the field, but it was adopted by ideologues to tell people that we have no right to judge. We have no right to judge another culture, that one culture is not any better than another culture, which is an insane thing to say.
Right.
Right. So and then there's another ideology that Victor Davis Hanson speaks about, which he terms utopian passivism, which is
explain that.
Okay, so that's illustrated by I mean, it's almost a sense of it combines with cultural relativism, because it assumes that everybody is innately good.
Yes.
Right? Everybody's innately good.
That is the assumption.
And as Barack Obama did on his, what Victor rightly terms his apology tour, when he gave his Cairo speech and he apologized.
Right.
He apologized. He pulled a Chamberlain. He apologized to the Muslim countries for the United States being a terrible
colonialism.
Yes, and that if only, and he went into this saying, if only we apologize and bow down to them, then they will be nice and they won't hurt us. Well, that's crazy. That's not based in reality.
Right.
One has to question is, were there other motives behind his doing that, to degrade the West in that way? But that's utopian pacifism, assuming that everybody's nice. If you're only nice to them, if you only bring people into your home. I mean, we could look at some of the tragic stories from Sweden of very nice Swedes who have opened up their homes
to the immigrants,
the immigrants, and some terrible things have happened.
Right.
You know, and I think that it's very important for us to fight to maintain a realistic sense of what the potentials are, both good and bad, if we do not adhere to standards of morality, if we do not stay true to biblical morality, we start facing some very, very frightening, possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what someone says in the film. Again, if everybody's ideas are okay, and we've left kind of the biblical mores upon which Western civilization was founded. I mean, really, and I think a lot of Jews don't realize that, but it's the mores of the Torah, and it's the framework of what's okay. A family, for example, instead of having some kind of family structure. If that's not okay, then, and everybody can make their own decisions about what they're going to do, then you just start seeing society falling apart. And, it's interesting because living here in Israel, the film was shown in Jerusalem last night, of course, living here in Israel. So we danced a little bit, I think, with Oslo, with going down that road of if we just would give them something, they won't hate us. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with an inherent hatred of wanting to get rid of us, of anything religious. It's just if we gave them a little more, there's something bad that we have done. If we just make up for that, they will like us. And Israel's pulled back from that. Unfortunately, we've had no choice. I mean, we've seen the true face of evil. But it doesn't seem like anybody talks like that anymore. The true face of evil, or the ideas that there's good and bad in the world.
Yeah, no. If you look, I mean, I know that this is true for Europe as well. But as an American, I'll speak about in the United States. If you talk about good and evil, people look at you like you're just a freak.
Exactly.
You're a freak, and you're a hateful person and a fascist.
Yeah.
And that's a very dangerous situation because there is good and evil.
Yes, there is.
And if one doesn't recognize that that there is an intent out there to destroy your way of life, then you're going to lose. Emmanuel Ottolenghi from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies makes a very, very important point in the film. He says that it is absolutely necessary for us to learn to be intolerant of the intolerant.
Right.
I mean, and he is not the first philosopher or scholar to say that. I mean, it has been said throughout the ages, and people today don't understand that. They don't understand that if you tolerate intolerance, the intolerance is a cancer, and it's going to consume your society.
Well, the basis of America and the basis of democracies in general would be freedom of speech.
Right.
So at some point, freedom of speech means that every person who's got a terrible thing to say is also allowed to say it, which is the underpinning. And is that good? But what happens when people don't realize that what he's saying is awful, right? You have like a Linda Sarsour in America now, right? Who I think is just a horrific human being. Okay. Yet she can stand up and say whatever she wants and lead women's marches. And instead of people saying, though, that this woman is advocating for a life that will destroy America, if we follow her, she's getting a following. So where's the problem here? Well, the freedom of speech, or with the mindset of people that they think what she's saying is okay?
Well, the problem here is that those who want to criticize her, those who want to stand up and say this is a person who is lying to you. This is a person who is promoting hate, right?
Right, exactly.
When we stand up and say that, we are labeled as being Islamophobic, we are labeled as being racist.
Right.
And there's only freedom of speech now for those who adhere to a progressive agenda. If you are not politically correct, you are not allowed to speak. And it's interesting with this film because this film really takes on, many aspects of political correctness. And so the film was just released on February 19th. Mm-hmm. And this was the Israel premiere, but it was the 7th screening. I mean, I toured first throughout California. And in several audiences, there was usually one or two individuals that were crying.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, because they weren't crying because they were offended by the film. They were crying because they didn't realize how dangerous things have gotten.
Oh, yeah. I think we're at a tipping point now when it comes to the West.
Yeah. So, look, one of the things that's really precious about Israel is that you're not struggling. Possibly, I would say not even in Tel Aviv. You're not struggling with adherence to God and Judaism and Christianity. For the Christians who are here, there's an understanding that God is part of the daily life.
Yes,
it is. Secularism is very dangerous, and it permeates the West, and it's a blessing that Israel is a role model, but unfortunately,
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
That Israel's a role model. When I take people around here, especially not just Christians and Jews, when I take Jews and Christians around Israel, and they're here because you really need to be here to feel it, I say that the West needs Israel more than Israel needs the West. You know,
Absolutely.
There's a tendency to look at Israel like this little stepchild that out of guilt from a Holocaust or whatever it is, the world needs to be nice to and whatever. And I think it's quite the opposite. I think we are the last bastion of that idea. And I'm not saying that everybody here in Israel is religious, because this is not a theocracy. And Israelis are all stripes and all kinds of levels of observance. But there is an idea that God is present in this country.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because there's a difference between religion and understanding of God. Organized religion, understanding of God. Yeah. And in Israel, you really understand it. Like I myself, and I consider myself a traditional person, have a lot of problems with the rabbinate, and I think things need to be changed. But no way does that undermine my feeling that we're a God people and that God is present in the world. Right. And that's what America used to be like and isn't anymore. And it's been replaced by this rampant secularism. Yeah. And where do we go with that, though?
Well, but I do need to say that we often, when we look at the United States, we often look at the coasts. We'll look at the Northeast, we'll look at the West Coast, and we forget about
the parentheses instead of what's in the parentheses.
That's right. So 2 years ago, my husband and I had the opportunity and privilege. I consider it a privilege now, if we're going to be in the States, to move to Tennessee, to move into the Bible Belt.
Really?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, God is present in the South, and that is where the potential to save the United States is.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what led to the current administration. And I mean, we can imagine if we'd had a continuation of the Obama years. I don't know if we could have pulled that back.
No, that would have been a no return. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, and God is present everywhere you turn in the lives of Tennesseans. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some pockets of progressivism, and
which I hate. I have to say, I hate that term because it's a positive term,
but it's
like
not,
moving forward. Right. But it's really not.
No, the progressivism today is really not progressivism.
Right.
It is really a totalitarian movement. It's a movement that promotes the silencing of opposition.
Right.
And it also it's changing the meaning of words. It's new speech.
Mm-hmm. Liberal is not what it used to be.
No, classic liberalism is not what the issue is. I mean, we need to protect classic liberal what's referred to as classic liberal values are based on the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, what we're talking about when we really shouldn't even use the term liberalism anymore to describe what's happening in the left. It's really progressivism, which has a new meaning. It means that you're anti-Western.
Right.
You're anti-male.
Yes.
God is no longer the creator. We are man is the creator, right?
Right.
And that gets manifested in some very dangerous ways. Yeah.
Yeah. For whom is who's your intended audience? Because listening to the film last night, you have a lot of professors, you have a lot of philosophers. I mean, people that I follow, but I'm immersed in this world because also I have to be able to speak about it in different places that I go. But a lot of the terminology that's used, a lot of the thinking, I don't know if it's not so much accessible, but easily understood by lay people.
Right.
So for who did you make this film for?
Well, I as with all my films, I think this one more so. I mean, I won't dumb down anything. I think that it's important for us to help audiences to stretch. But because of what's happening now, because of the level of danger that we see, it's very important that this film reach policymakers and reach university scholars and administrators that are not yet anti-Western. And I have to tell you that some of the communities that I have shown the film to in California, where the attendees were mostly, for instance, in Fresno, California. It was a wonderful audience. It was a screening event that was co-sponsored by a mega church and Chabad of Fresno.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Both communities came together.
Wow. And
on both sides there were farmers. And
I think it's the grape capital of the world or something, Fresno.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Well, there's
raisins. Yeah.
Yeah, frogs.
Right. And Victor Davis Hanson lives there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he has a farm
I visited
there.
him there years ago.
Yeah. And they understood the issues because they hear about it, whether on Shabbat,
right,
by the rabbi at Chabad or by their pastors. The pastors talk about it on Sundays. They know what's going on. The evangelical Christians get what's going on. And I've been getting, and this is very sad for me to say, but because of the disconnection, the rate of disconnection in diaspora Jewry, the disconnection between them and the land of Israel,
yes,
is horrifying. And thank God that we have allies, that we have partners in the evangelical world, because if we had to depend upon ourselves, it would be frightening.
Well, I was just at AIPAC 2 weeks ago, which is the big lobby group for Israel. 18,000 people, both Jews and non, who love Israel. One of the discussions that was going on, of course, is about the campuses, which is the bottleneck for all the future leaders. And, as Jews, and also I know from Christians that I speak to, a lot of whom are not sending their kids to the campuses because it's like I talk about it like throwing goldfish into a shark tank.
Right.
And they're just going to get everything taken apart that we've spent 18 or 19 years putting into our kids. But it's not just the Jewish and Christian kids are on campus. It's also the future congressmen.
That's right.
The future politicians, and it's the future teachers and the future professors. And this is what they're being exposed to. So in 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, this is all that's going to be taught, because that's what they're being taught now. Right.
Except that there is a growing movement among conservative scholars and administrators. And unfortunately, they're in the minority, but they exist. And there are institutes that are being founded and that are growing to counter this, to counter the anti-Western sentiment, which includes the anti-Judeo-Christian values. And I think I see them as having a great impact. Now, I made this film to be used in classrooms, not necessarily, campus screenings are nice, but what happens with campus screenings is that those who, who support the issues, they attend,
right.
and the others
Preaching
stand
to the
outside.
converted,
And the other, and that's also important because it helps with language. It helps
Yes.
with
Sure.
to deepen the analysis. And then those who really need to hear it are protesting outside the building. I measure impact for this film by the number of professors that will integrate it into their curriculum. And I have to say, I'm just pleased because I've been getting, I got an email from a professor in Paris a few days ago,
Really?
saying that it's because he had ordered, before the film came out, he ordered the DVD. He received the DVD, he watched it, he said, "This is fabulous, I am using it in my classrooms."
Wow.
And that's why I made this film. Now, the university is not the only place that we have to work on. We have to work on the public square. We have to
Right.
work on the policymakers.
Right. And synagogues and churches.
Oh,
as
synagogues
well.
and churches, absolutely. And I see my biggest challenge, frankly, in the Jewish world.
Right. Are the Reform or even the Conservative
the Reform
going,
and
to,
yes.
going to screen these films?
Right, and
right?
there are, and there
Are they brave enough to do that?
Are they brave enough to do it? And it's going to be interesting to see.
Wow, that's you have quite a battle in front of you on that. What languages? I know your other films have been translated into different languages. Do you have that plan for this film as well? You said you're a professor in Paris.
Yeah. So right now, the film is in the process of being translated into French, and as soon as I get the funding to translate it into other languages, I can do that. And then also when there are whether cable or broadcast companies that decide that they want to do it in their country, then they can also translate it, which happened in Sweden, Finland, and Estonia for the last film. But my plan is, as soon as the angel steps forward and says, "Here, translated into the languages," then it will be translated into those languages.
How about Hebrew?
It's
Our campuses here in Israel are not such great places.
No, I
either.
understand that. I got funding for the French. That's why the French started.
Okay.
So my films, the previous 3 films have been translated into Arabic, French, Arabic, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, and then Body and Soul also in Swedish and Estonian and Finnish. Yeah.
How about Russian?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say Russian?
No, I don't know. Maybe you did, and I missed it.
Because I remember it, but in alphabetical order: Arabic, French, German, Hebrew, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. I think I might have forgotten Russian before. Yeah, Russian. They're all in Russian. Yeah.
You know, I wonder sometimes if people are looking for like a strong leader and then overstepping. Like we talk about really the dearth of leadership in the world right now on so many levels. And the people that come to mind as the strong leaders are the ones who are not necessarily someone you would want as part of your family. Let's say a Putin. Everybody says what a great leader Putin is for Russia. He's not great for the rest of the world, but everybody knows he has Russia's interests at heart. You certainly can't call him, raised on Thomas Jefferson or anything like that. So are we playing with fire here, that we're looking for somebody who will kind of make Seder, as we say, like make it all right, or make it all, make our country safe. However, when you do that, you can close it down as well. You end up with totalitarian regimes, and like we see all around here in the Middle East, like we see what's happened now in Turkey. Are Europe and I don't know about America yet, is Europe teetering on that, where you have, I even think, let's say, of Andrea Merkel, who's let in all these Syrian refugees. Now, she was democratically elected, and I know we have to be careful specifically when we talk about Germany. But are there a lot of unhappy people that she did that? It's not something that can be walked back at all.
It's not something that could be walked at, and I think they've reached a point of no return. I mean, we know that the birth rate in Germany is abominable. So what did
lowest in the world?
Yeah, and so what did she do? Did she make a decision that they were going to deal with non-existent birth rate by bringing in migrants?
Right, have a workforce.
And she has come out and said, I believe she has come out and said that people just better get used to the idea that it's going to be a Muslim country.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
Well, it used to be that immigration, and someone speaks about it in the film, used to be that immigration was within a generation or two, you were your host country. So I know, let's say my grandparents who left Tsarist Russia, probably, I don't know, close to 100 years ago now, but they became the most loyal and the most patriotic Americans that you could ever ask for.
Right.
But now what you have with immigration, especially let's say in Europe, but I think in the United States also, is it's okay to... that they keep doing their own thing, that they don't get integrated.
Right. And there's also outside of Middle America, or so again, we're pointing to the coast.
Right.
There's not an intense sense of patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sustain a society without patriotism, but you do have that sense of patriotism in Middle America. Mm-hmm. Thank God. Look, I think that there are different, in a healthy society, when you come out of a period of 8 years of having a leader that was not particularly patriotic,
right,
and was
to say the least,
not leading the country in a direction of pride and unity.
No, he was apologizing for being an American almost.
Apologizing,
not almost.
And also really fanning the flames of discord in the country.
And racism, ironically.
You need a corrective. So the next stage might not necessarily be your ideal, but it might be your ideal corrective. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need to be appreciative of the fact that we have that corrective right now. Right now we have that corrective. Right.
Yeah. But I don't know. We can't just sit and say, okay, now everything is fine.
No, not everything
There's
is fine.
There's like an opportunity here to make some longer term corrections.
That's right.
Maybe.
There's an opportunity here to, while the administration or while the leadership breaks down the political correctness, by just throwing, really, we need to be part of that confrontation of political correctness. We need to be part of the disempowerment of political correctness. We need to be able to speak truth, and we need to be able to, based on facts, right? And we need to be able to establish the hierarchy of facts and truth over ideology.
Right. What did someone say last night? That ideology, you can't fight ideology with facts, because the feeling is that they're looking for a perfect world.
Right.
And therefore, if you fight them, you are evil, because you don't want the world to be good.
Right.
So you become the problem.
Right. Look, I think that it's important. We have a huge battle in front of us. It's important for us not to be hopeless. Mm-hmm. We can't do it ourselves. I do believe we will have the help of God, but we need to act.
Yeah,
we need to fight this, and we need to stand up, and we need to not be
Joshua.
We need to be not intimidated by any accusations that will be thrown at us.
I look in the Bible, and I sometimes, and a lot of us wonder, why are people's flaws pointed out? Here you have King David, who's King David, and the writer of Psalms, and Messiah will come. We believe that he will still come. Others believe he has come from David. But why is he shown as not a great husband, not a great father? And I think it's so that the Bible can say this is wrong and this is right. That it can give us that morality. If everybody's doing everything right, then there's no sense of, no, this was wrong and you were punished for it. Or even as a people, the things, why was the first temple destroyed? Why was the second temple destroyed? The first temple was destroyed because of idolatry, because of murder, because of improper sexual behavior. And that's a tremendous punishment for that. But by the people having done it and then having the punishment, the Bible lays out, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. This is wrong. And in today's world, sometimes you feel like nothing's wrong. Like, if someone's a pedophile, it's because he was abused when he was a child. So you can't really blame him, because there's, that's just the way it is. So there's no sense of personal responsibility. There's no sense of, we're all born with weaknesses. We're all born with tendencies. You have to overcome yourself to become the better person that God wants you to be.
Yeah. And you also, I believe you also need to stand up and do what you can, even if you're not perfect. Even if you
That's
know,
a great point.
Yeah. I mean, and we need to also not to expect I think one of the things that's happening is that when opposition stands up and is willing to take a leadership role, they become vulnerable to attack from who they're opposing, right?
Well, we see what's happening in this country. Yes.
And we see what's happening also in the United States.
Right.
And people have to, and what's dangerous in that is that it's a one-way street. If we look at, I mean, Obama actually recently made a statement that there was no scandals during his administration. That is the most insane thing for him to say. There are lots of scandals, but he's Mr. Teflon.
And also the media, which is unfortunately a very big part of this problem that we're discussing now, covers up for a lot of
the media is
the mainstream media.
Mainstream media is it's like the change of language, like the reconstruction of language. Mainstream media has been reconstructed not to be a conveyor of fact, but to be a conveyor of ideology. You know, and I was interesting. A very, very brilliant professor of media systems who I interviewed, but I wasn't able to put it in the film because I had to really focus in on the highest priority issues so that the film wouldn't be 2 hours.
Okay, next film.
Yeah. But he talked about, during the interview, he talked about that there was a point where print media was really suffering financially. And each of them from all sides made a decision that they had to choose a constituency. And that's who they were going to write for, that constituency, to keep that constituency, because that was their installed base. That was their guaranteed revenue.
So that explains the New York Times there.
Yeah, but it's the problem is that it's throughout mainstream media.
Right.
You know, so we subscribe to the media that supports what we think. And we don't have the option anymore of saying, I am in mainstream media, of supporting a specific media, because we know that that's where we're going to get the facts. That's where we're not going to get, you know, the
editorializing.
That's right. We're going to get the facts. And that's why alternative media has been emerging in very strong ways.
This podcast and others on this station.
Because we need this. We need this, or else we won't have any context for anything.
So what's your feeling? I know you feel that, and I also do, that in the end God will come through.
Only if we act.
Only if we act. And my only question is also the price that we pay. You know, that's it. Like I do think in the end things will be fine. The question is what happens between now and then, and do we deserve it to be fine? Is it going to be despite us or because of us? And I think, though, that this gives, and also really the lack, I think, of really great leadership like we've had in the past in the world, allows little people, let's say like myself, or you're not a little person, but someone who's not necessarily elected or famous, to be able to have some kind of an impact. But I think that everybody has that possibility now to do something. And my listeners know, because I harp on this all the time, if you're not doing anything, you're letting the bad guys win. Because they don't stop for a minute.
Right. Silent. I mean, this is, you know, I know that this is, you know, a corny phrase, but it's true. Silence is complicity.
Yeah.
You know, we can't be. Everybody needs to figure out what they can do. And it needs to be, we need a comprehensive opposition to.
So where's that going to come from? I mean, it's not going to come, let's say, from a political party. Not here in Israel, or not in America or Australia or anything that I see there. It's grassroots.
I actually think it's grassroots. It has to be grassroots, because again, you're right. It's not necessarily, you know, from a general perspective, coming from leadership, and it's
But we're not intimidating. You know, as a matter of fact, we are being intimidated.
Right. We need to stop being intimidated.
Right.
We need to stop being intimidated. We need to stop thinking that, you know, they used to, in my generation, I'm 68 this year. In my generation, you know, we used to, one of the things that we were always taught in school was sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
It's not true anymore.
It's not true anymore, but we need to, we need to stand firm. We need to have a good sense of ourselves. And Dan Diker, in the conclusion of the film, he says that we must maintain our self-concept as moral actors.
That's where I think Israel has a huge role to play.
Yeah. And that's,
because we will not be intimidated.
Right.
And we will face down evil. And I know that when people come here, one of the greatest things that I've ever heard was somebody saying to me, you totally reframed what I thought Jews were. Because here in Israel, because they were from the States, they never met any kind of Jew who was nationalistic, who was proud, who felt that, I mean, I think I'm the sign of God in the world because he brought me home, which is good news for everybody, that God keeps his promises. Yeah. And that it's insane that there's any Jews at all. And here we are doing really well and being strong. And unlike the Christians of the Middle East, which was talked about in the film, who are just being slaughtered at a rate of like 1 every 6 minutes or some insane number like that.
Every 6 minutes, a Christian someplace in the world
is killed because of being Christian.
Because of being Christian.
Not just a robbery.
Right.
He's killed for his religion.
Right.
Amazing. And here in Israel, the only reason it's not happening to the Jews in the Middle East is because we carved out a little place for ourselves and we're protecting ourselves with everything we've got.
Right. Right.
And so I think that that's a sign that other people can do that as well. If we can do it, so can others, if they have the will to do it.
If they have the will to do it.
That's the question.
Right.
Now.
And people need to really ask themselves, do you really want to live in the world that we will be facing if we don't stand up and protect the values and the morals, the moral standing
that we have cherished for so long,
absolutely.
and that so many people have died for in all these world wars.
Right. You know, and people say, you know, it's too hard. Well, think about how difficult it's going to be. Yeah, it's really pretty bad, and there's no reason to be afraid. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to think about fear, think about the fear that's going to exist down the road if we don't do something.
Well, you know, where was I reading? It was last year, and I've mentioned this before, that something like 10 or 12 leaders of European countries don't have children, including Merkel and others. And that means that they're making decisions about a future in which they really have no personal stake.
That's right.
And that's what having children means, is that you are in for the future. When you're not around, you are still wanting to make, you know, if you don't want carbon emissions or whatever it is, you're hoping to leave a better world for your kids. Right. When you don't have that, when your society, even if you don't have your own kids, but when your society is not oriented towards children, it's a very different kind of society.
It is. I mean, Neil Ferguson points to that. Yeah, he points to that when he talks about Burke's analysis of the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And he talks about the importance of a pact between the past, the present, and the future, and illustrated by his grandfathers fought in both World Wars to make sure that the world was a better place for him, and he hadn't even been born yet. Mm-hmm. You know, and we don't. You have it in Israel. We don't have it outside of Israel.
Right. Well, look, in a couple of weeks' time, it's now Nisan. It's now the Jewish month of Nisan. And in less than just a few days, we're going to be sitting down for Passover Seder. And Passover Seder is really the prime example, I think, of historical memory, because we sit and we say, we came out of Egypt. We were slaves. We came out of Egypt. And so that connects us with our past. And we sit there and it's all about the kids, and it's all about making it relevant for the kids. And it's about the future. So I'm so proud to belong to a people, you know, who feels like that. And, you know, and again, just to get back to this, the two soldiers that were killed on Friday. So they were killed near Dotan, near the valley of Dotan. And Dotan, for those who don't know, is where Joseph is taken to Egypt. That's where the pit is that he's thrown in, and he's taken by the Ishmaelites to Egypt, which starts our whole sojourn that we're going to be celebrating the end of in a few days. And so when you live here in the land, you feel it's not, the past is not just the past, and the future is not just the future, or the present, the present. It's all somehow wrapped together. And I feel incredibly grateful to be a part of a people that can still be the light into the nations in ways that we didn't think of before. Mm-hmm. And what your film is showing once again the relevance of the Bible, once again the relevance of the people of the Bible, in a way that we wouldn't have imagined before. But the fight against the West imploding and really eating itself up. And I think that that's very important for all of us to remember, and to be grateful that we live in a time that we can do this.
Yeah, I wanted to share one other thing that
Sure.
I just remembered, which is that the North American premiere of the film was shown in Santa Monica. The David Horowitz Freedom Center sponsored the screening at the Broad Stage, and it was a great event. And recently I've gotten an email from one of the women who was at the screening, and she told me that groups of women have been meeting together, watching the film and discussing it.
Really?
Yes.
Amazing.
And, my films are organized into chapters so that it is easy mm-hmm. for study groups
right.
or classrooms to watch it a chapter at a time and then discuss it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really excited, because this is my intention for all the films has been to be educational resources, tools, or
right.
weapons
right.
for people to use to fight for what's right.
Mm-hmm. But definitely, without education, without understanding the problem,
yeah.
then we're not gonna be able to win the battle at
right.
all. So Gloria Greenfield, producer and director, The Fight of Our Lives, Defeating the Ideological War Against the West. If anybody listening wants to get a hold of a DVD mm-hmm. and show the film, where can they go for that? Do you have a website?
Yes, there's a website for the film. It's The Fight of Our Lives. You have to have thefightofourlives.com.
Okay. Everybody do it. It's not an easy film to watch. You might have to stop and look up something even in the dictionary, really, because it's very, very bright people making very important points. But we have to see it. We have to see it, and we have to act on it, and not just ignore it, because it really is the fight of our lives, without question. Gloria, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
And take care, everybody. Thanks to Ben and to Tabitha. You have been listening to a slightly hoarse, hopefully I'll be better next week, Eve Harrow on Rejuvenation for the Land of Israel Network. Take care, everybody. Goodbye for now.